Last winter, I decided to take a vacation to a small coastal town in Maine. Escaping the hustle and bustle of the busy city, I rented an isolated cabin through Airbnb, situated near a quiet beach. Even though it was winter, the sea view was still mesmerizing. I planned to stay there for a whole week, enjoying the peace and tranquility. After flying into Portland, I rented a car and drove 2 hours to reach the cabin. By then, it was around 9 p.m. I was feeling exhausted and just wanted to quickly move my luggage inside and rest. As I got out of the car, I noticed how quiet the surroundings were, with only the sound of the wind in my ears. The cabin had a dimly lit front porch that exuded a cozy warmth. As I made my way up the steps to the door, I suddenly heard the crunching of fallen leaves, and turning around, I saw the lights of a neighbor's house turn on. At this moment, a middle-aged man, clad in a heavy coat, emerged from the neighbor's front yard, waving cheerfully at me. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he called out warmly. I nodded and smiled back, waving in return, but I didn't want to get into a long conversation. I just wanted to get inside the cabin as quickly as possible. I closed the car door, and hurriedly carried my luggage to the front door. In my haste, I noticed the neighbor still standing there, seemingly taking a last look at the new tenant. Feeling a bit uneasy, I quickly entered the cabin and locked the door behind me. The interior of the cabin was warm and cozy, simply decorated, but with a subtle charm. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and headed straight to the bathroom. After a relaxing hot shower to wash away the day's fatigue, I heard the doorbell ring. Being in the bathroom, I decided to ignore it. Once out of the bathroom, I changed into my pajamas and immediately fell into the soft bed, quickly drifting off to sleep under the thick blankets. When I woke up, it was already 10 a.m. the next day, with rays of sunlight gently streaming through the window and warming my face. That day, I drove into town, visited the local market, savored some local delicacies, and bought quite a few handicrafts. When I returned to the cabin around 5 p.m., I saw the man from the previous night standing on his porch. Upon seeing me, he quickly disappeared back into his house. I tried to shake off the feeling, quickly walked to the front door, entered the code, and went inside. Over the next hour, I kept checking outside the windows to see if the man had returned. His behavior made me feel uneasy. Later that evening, while curled up on the couch watching TV, I suddenly heard soft thumping noises against the back door, rhythmic and continuous. I walked to the back door and looked out, only to see a dark figure quickly dart past. A chill ran down my spine. Hoping the noise was just the wind blowing branches against the door, I cautiously opened the back door and called out, "Who's there? Please go away," but there was no response. After a while, the dark figure reappeared in my line of sight. Crouching down, I couldn't see their face clearly. Fear gripped my heart, and I quickly shut the door, locking all possible entries with trembling fingers. I returned to the couch, holding my breath, ears perked up, ready to call the police at the slightest noise. Just then, the thumping noise stopped, and I began to feel my heartbeat slowly return to normal. At 10 p.m., I went to bed, still somewhat scared, listening closely to the wind outside. Not long after falling asleep, I was suddenly awakened by the sharp sound of something scraping against glass. I sat up straight and listened carefully. I walked out of the bedroom, looked around the living room, and didn't see anything, but the eerie feeling of unseen eyes watching me persisted. Finally, I couldn't bear it any longer and called 911, describing everything I had experienced. When the police arrived around 3 a.m., they carefully inspected the cabin's surroundings but found nothing. I overheard them discussing over their radios that there had been no recent similar reports in the area. After the police left, I was to shake into sleep. I forced myself to close my eyes until the first light of dawn. I decided not to stay any longer, quickly packed my belongings, and left the eerie cabin. Returning home, I still felt a lingering unease. I couldn't forget the presence of that dark figure, as if telling me, some places are never meant to be visited alone, especially on a cold winter night. Last spring, I decided to travel to the Irish countryside, seeking a peaceful retreat away from the city's hustle. Through a friend's recommendation, I rented an old cabin situated in a remote valley. I was told that the scenery there was stunning, with vast green fields and a few small streams meandering through. When I arrived, I found the cabin even more rustic than I had imagined. Its wooden walls were covered in moss, and the roof tiles were partly broken, making it seem as though the cabin had stood there for centuries. Despite its dilapidation, it had a unique charm. I opened the wooden door, and a puff of dust hit my face. After a quick tidy up, I decided to take a walk and explore the surroundings. The area was tranquil, with only the sound of the wind rustling through the grass, and the occasional distant gurgle of flowing water. As dusk approached, I returned to the cabin, intending to rest early. After washing up, I lit a fire in the old fireplace, and sat in an ancient rocking chair to read for a while. Unintentionally, I began to doze off, only to be startled awake by a strange noise from an unknown source. I stood up and listened carefully. The sound came from afar, intermittently and indistinctly. I checked the cabin's doors and windows, which were all securely closed, indicating that the noise wasn't coming from outside. Grabbing a flashlight, I decided to investigate. By then, the area outside was shrouded in thick fog, severely limiting visibility. I slowly walked through the yard, feeling the slippery, muddy ground beneath my feet. The mysterious sound grew clearer, but I still couldn't pinpoint its origin. It seemed to emanate from all directions. I followed a small path for a while, and spotted a withered old tree ahead. Just then, the sound abruptly ceased, and silence reclaimed the surroundings. A sense of indescribable fear welled up within me, prompting me to head back. As I turned back, I caught a glimpse of a figure through the mist. I stood frozen in shock, shining the flashlight towards where the figure had been, but saw nothing. My mind raced with thoughts. Was it a hallucination, or was someone following me? I quickened my pace back to the cabin, locked the door securely, but my unease lingered. I tried to convince myself it was just a passing hiker, but the unsettling feeling grew stronger. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep until dawn. Early the next morning, I decided to head into town and talk to the locals about the previous night's events. In a town cafe, I met an elderly man. After hearing my story, he frowned and said, "That valley is indeed ancient, and many people have vanished there in the past. Legend has it that in the mist, you can hear the whispers of lost souls." Though his words sounded like old folklore, my experience the previous night was hard to dismiss. I returned to the cabin, packed my belongings, and decided to cut my trip short. As I left, I stood in front of the cabin and took one last look. The fog had lifted, sunlight bathed the green fields, and the cabin looked peaceful and serene. Yet, the fear rooted in my heart reminded me that this journey would remain an unforgettable experience. 2 years ago, seeking a quiet place to finish my dissertation, I rented a small apartment in a sleepy town, nestled in the Vermont hills. After days of searching for the perfect spot, I discovered an old library at the edge of town. It was seldom visited, which made it an ideal place for focused study. The library, established in the early 1800s, had a grand yet eerie appearance. Its Gothic architecture, tall stained glass windows, and rows of age-old books gave it a peculiar atmosphere. Despite its slightly haunting exterior, I felt drawn to it, believing it to be the perfect retreat from distractions. I made it a habit to arrive early each morning with my laptop and research materials, finding an isolated corner on the second floor. The library was usually empty, apart from the occasionally sighted librarian, an elderly woman with silver hair tied in a neat bun, who seemed almost to be part of the building's history herself. One rainy afternoon, while engrossed in my work, I was suddenly interrupted by a faint whisper. I glanced around but saw no one. The whisper seemed to be coming from the historical section of the library, an area filled with ancient manuscripts and dusty tomes. Curious, I approached the section, my footsteps echoing softly on the wooden floor. Standing amidst rows of books, I strained to listen. The whisper grew slightly louder, clearer, but I still couldn't make out the words. It sounded like a low, murmured conversation, almost as if the books themselves were communicating. I decided it was my overactive imagination, possibly influenced by the library's ghostly ambience, and returned to my desk. Moments later, the whispering resumed, this time closer and more distinct. I turned sharply, yet still, no one was there. Cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized the whisper seemed to be calling my name. Unsure whether to feel frightened or intrigued, I decided to pack my things and leave for the day. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The whispers haunted my dreams, filling them with images of old books and shadowy figures. I woke several times, covered in a cold sweat, the sound of my name echoing in my ears. Determined to confront whatever was happening, I returned to the library the next day. The librarian greeted me with her usual kind but distant smile. I wandered back to the historical section, drawn by an inexplicable urge to uncover the source of the whispers. As I stood among the ancient volumes, I noticed one book slightly out of place. It was a thick, leather-bound tome, its cover adorned with strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Tentatively, I pulled it from the shelf, and the whispers ceased. Opening the book, one discovered it was a collection of letters, penned by various hands, spanning several centuries. Each letter was addressed to someone named Ethan, which coincidentally was my name. The realization sent a jolt of shock through me. I thumbed through the pages, reading cryptic messages and arcane symbols, feeling an eerie connection to them. Engrossed in the mysterious book, I lost track of time. The library grew darker as the sun set, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows. Just as I was about to close the book, a final whisper filled the air, clear and unmistakable. "Find the hidden key." Ethan, that was enough for me. I slammed the book shut, rushed down the stairs, and exited the library, my heart pounding furiously. I decided then to never return, the allure of the ancient place tarnished by the unnerving whispers and cryptic book. Back at my apartment, I couldn't help but ponder the mystery of the hidden key, and why the whispers had called my name. Though I resolved to finish my dissertation elsewhere, the experience stayed with me, a constant reminder of the haunted library at the edge of town and the secrets it held within its ancient walls. Years later, the memory of that eerie library remains vivid, the whispers a chilling echo in my mind. Some mysteries, I concluded, are best left unexplored, especially those tangled in the forgotten corners of history.